2, 3. Test
Just
this,
needs
1, 2, 3,
to
1,
make sure
2,
he's
3.
not misread that situation.
The best thing Clem could do right now is just, I hope in the next 10 seconds we see a Ghost Academy or something like that.
Test, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Test, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3.
That would absolutely decimate this army of herO. And herO is looking to buy time, and yet
Let me just adjust my video capture device.
That War Prism's going to do damage. He killed the turret in the main base. I mean, we might see that Oracle come into play later.
Yeah, no, I saw the Oracle.
Alright.
I thought the exact same thing. He's creating opportunities for further down the line.
Test this 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Test this 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3.
The Zealot's got left behind. That's a great shutdown.
Not sure how loud this is on the channel. It will be tested next as we watch the latter part, the slow but steady, almost assured victory of young Clem, 21-year-old from France. If not one of the best 3 Terrans in the world already, in the top 5, and anyone ahead of him are people like herO and other Koreans, among non-Koreans, but easily the best Terran player in the world. So many victories, has played tons of games for his age, lots of first, second, and third place finishes. I mean, literally hundreds of medals, if you can. Here's a late attempt by herO to use what he's got left after he lost game 1 and is on his way to lose game 2, and he's gonna have to come all the way back. This is lots of explosions on both sides. Let me check my sound here real quick. I can.
Phoenix before the Widowmines could actually shoot off on them, which was nice. But herO, he's still alive. 4 bases to 4 bases, though. It's not as if he got ahead after.
All right, test this 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Test this 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3.
To hold on against Clem, but that army seriously lacking AOE, and in just a few moments.
All right, so some major announcing going on here.
Gets a little bit worse for herO.
That's the issue. It feels like Clem's
So
continuing to
I did game 1 of herO versus herO. Epic series of 2 living legendary rivals from Korea who couldn't be more different in their apparent personalities and clearly so in their play styles, not just that they play different races. And I really want to make sure to give that series its due. Now that it's tied up at 1 after the 2 games we've done, and it's going to go the full 5 with herO pulling it out in the end, 3-2, and then going on to the finals, beating Bunny, another Korean rival, and another Terran, to win the Atlanta championships late last year. This right here with young Mr. Clem in the blue background and team colors, and herO himself, the Korean, who just lost to Clem in game 2 of 5, the quarterfinals of these Valencia 2022 DreamHack Starcraft 2 Masters. Basically, at this point, there are 3 or 4 major international championships. I mean, you can include a number of Korean championships as being on that level because they have 2/3 of the best players in the world, at least, just in terms of numbers. Probably higher than that in terms of overall, quality of all of those players. Go down the rankings. Clem here from France, although French, which isn't a huge churner out of StarCraft stars, but like with all sports and stuff, France, is a big old rich ex-colonial, still nuclear powered, superpowered nation, and so it's gonna have competitors. And Clem is a very exciting and he's good looking, and you'll see him smile a little bit, but he's also very reserved and very humble, very focused. is one of those young kids, to me, he's a kid now, where you can see the twitching going on in his brain behind the eyes. Not just watching him, but watching his play specifically, and then you hear that he has like the most clicks per minute or whatever. But anyways, as a 21-year-old from France, the fact that he's in the top 4 or 5 in the world of all players, including all the Koreans, just shows you how good he is. And he did just get through this year's version of what I was trying to get through the explanation of these various tournaments, which is, for now, the major finals, the World Championship, what used to be called WCS, World Championship Series, is now held in Poland, in Katowice, I don't know how to pronounce it, a traditional Starcraft location, which has become the major Starcraft location in Poland, and it's the fiscal year, so it happens in February. So, for example, the 2022 championships happened in this past February 2023, and the major ones will be held there for all of the events of this year, early next year. But there are 2 other major world events that lead into it that are nicely spaced about 3 or 4 months apart, that are major world championships considered premier level championships of their own. Unsurprisingly, it's spaced variously between Europe, North America, and major Asian locations. They've had it in Korea. I believe, had it in China as well. It's going to be in Sweden in a couple weeks. They're doing the qualifiers right now via the internet, but we'll be in person for the top 16 or 32. I guess top 32, I think. It's a weird system where like 16 get placed automatically, and then 32 can play in, and then they have to go through a bunch more rounds to then get the chance to play the 16 top seeded finalists, which will be decided after tomorrow, I believe, for good, and then it moves to Sweden in a few weeks in person for the finals. And then there's a one in, I believe it's in Atlanta again this fall, November. There's my cat. Then the big, huge, giant, what used to be World Championship Series one, which is under the banner of IEM as opposed to DreamHack. ESL is running the whole thing. I don't know how the corporate stuff for all this working, but it's the same players ultimately, even though they do the qualifiers differently in the different regions. And Korea has their complete own system, and they get tons of players in the finals because they have so many of the highest ranked players, so it wouldn't be fair otherwise. They reserve a couple for the Americas, a few more for Europe, which does have a pretty active community, and then a small number for non-Korean Asian countries, although that's going to probably expand soon with the success of Oliveira and participation of both Communist Chinese and Taiwanese Chinese born and raised habitating players and so forth. So anyways, I knew that herO had his best year last year. He at one point played 28 to 30 best of 3 or 5 or 7 series against major top ranked Zerg players in one. Okay, so we're not talking about 28 wins in a row. We're talking about, you can lose, obviously, in a best of 3, best of 5, best of 7, as long as you win the series. But he didn't lose a series to another Zerg player from Korea or otherwise for like 28 straight series, which must have spanned, the 2 or 3 years since he's been back from the military. He's broken all sorts of records, herO, in terms of what he's accomplished post required military service. You know, most players at that do put off their military service, and then by the time they come back, they're mid to late 20s, and like regular athletes, only the best of the best of the best, like a herO, and it looks like guys like herO remain in top form and at the top of the list into their late 20s and now 30s, with herO, I believe, is 30 or 31 years old. But he had his best overall year competitively last year. And in this one here in Valencia, which was almost exactly a year ago, and will be mirrored this coming June in Sweden, the DreamHack Starcraft 2 Masters, herO did very well overall in Valencia and continued that streak against Zerg player, but lost to a fellow South Korean, and one of those South Korean who has gone like years without losing to anyone but Koreans. Like, I think he went 5 years. Dark is the player. I don't have his proper name in front of me. It's funny how the Koreans have these like really standard, like almost just boring names like herO and Dark, and but then you have funny ones like Bunny, and then there are ones that I guess that are derivatives of Korean words. The Europeans are usually nicknames, like Clem here from France is Clement, I believe, Clement. I don't know how that translates in English. So Clem, so just nickname or whatever. But anyways, I knew and have watched closely herO's loss to Dark in what comes after this round in the semifinals of Valencia. Dark then goes on, and does he beat herO? Does herO also get to the finals there? I can't remember. Or no, he might beat Rainer, who just lost in a big upset today, and maybe can still play his way in. I'm not sure how that's going to work, but isn't going to be a seeded player, which is a travesty, but he didn't win the games he had to win against Terran player Spirit, who's an up-and-comer and certainly was not predicted to get one of the final spots by beating Rainer. But in this round, it looks like, as usual, this is going to be the end of herO. It starts off really bad in game 1 and continues bad in game 2. Clem, while he looks younger than young, I mean, he looks like 12 to me. I guess they say he's 20 or 21 years old. But with a giant brain and a great player, actually, like most Europeans, how do I phrase this? You'd think because of Korea's generally traditional culture in a lot of ways, or traditional aspects to Korean culture, and how they're very kind of buttoned up and serious and so forth, that would be reflected in their play. But through each generation of StarCraft and now StarCraft 2, when there's been major innovations, it's almost always been Koreans who have been the innovators, herO being the current, and I am not a PhD doctorate historian in StarCraft. I know a lot about it and have been following it since the beginning, but it seems like herO has already gone down in history, even while still playing at top level, as one of the great innovators of all time. And actually, it's the European players and now some North American players and South American players who play a little bit more conservatively, more predictably, because it's not in our cultures. You have to be a nerd. It's a national sport in Korea. It's a mainstream thing that tons of kids do, like soccer in most countries outside of the United States, or football in America. And so, it's kids who are also gamers in other ways. And so Clem here tends to play Terrans the way Terrans are, quote unquote, supposed to be played, as opposed to Oliveira, who, although Chinese, not Korean, obviously, is beating on the Koreans and everybody else, as definitely the hottest, on the hottest of streaks, Terran player in the world, and maybe player overall. We'll see after Sweden in a few weeks. Oliveira, that is, formerly known as Time, who easily got through his few rounds that he had to play over these last few weeks, and ESL qualifiers. Clem is kind of a straight ahead Terran player, and the reason Terrans I think are they are adding major units and patches and stuff every few months, and then every few years, even bigger changes in some cases. Often it's just to tighten it up, but there's still certain things that always remain true, like you can win as a Zerg by just building as many cheap small units as quickly as possible over the course of the whole game and throwing them creatively at the other player. That's literally called getting zerged. It comes from here, and has been a gaming term for many years. Protoss will always be a little too expensive and a little too delicate for them to ever be a 1A or a level 2 quality race across the board in terms of balance of units and structures and so forth and overall dynamics, which is why it's both cool but unsurprising that the major innovation is being done by the best Protoss player in the world. herO, and maybe that's why herO plays the Protoss, is specifically because it forces him to innovate, because you can't win at the percentage that he does against both Protoss and non-Protoss players without being incredibly innovative, in his case, incredibly unpredictable and aggressive. And what happens in this series, and let me go back a little bit here, so we don't have silence here as we watch herO close out his second game against Clem. As you'll see, the map in the bottom left, these are herO's bases in the northwest, Clem in the southeast. But you can already look at the numbers, look at the build orders, look at the minerals, the size of the armies, etc., and see that Clem is ahead. And while herO is going to continue to be aggressive with whatever units he has to hand, as they say, like he always is, he does, the one thing that's his weakness, which is being aggressive beyond having the benefit of giving you, surprise or unpredictability, and is just totally irrationally, irrational is not the right word, and is both a sort of mathematically and just through basic optics, clear that you are losing in every phase and need to try and retreat and rebuild. He will still attack, and so he'll lose those games. But often, another level thing about herO, and so defining of his character, is that he often goes down 2 games to 0 or 2 games to 1 or 3 games to 1 and comes back, and it's almost as if he's okay losing a game or 2 or even 3 in a 7-game series to feel out the other player and try things, but also put ideas in their heads about what he will and won't do. And that's what we're doing right now by going through the 5-game Maru series from the semifinals from Atlanta from the end of last year. And in these first 2 games, Clem, the amazing young Terran player from France, in blue there, who's going to, work his way towards domination and victory, I think within a minute or 2. The numbers and momentum are just completely with him, and the builds, the base build here is really awkward and inefficient. And I don't want to show you, all 30 minutes of the first 2 games combined, which each go 12, 13, 14 minutes, and then you have breaks, because it's just an increasing level of this, which is why, as I was trying to get to, Terrans are always at least tied for the best race with the Zerg and occasionally the Protoss when things are unbalanced. Because they're the most flexible, they can do the most different things, but they really only have one major strategy, which is both their biggest strength and their biggest weakness. And it's a strategy. There's Clem with the victory. It's a strategy that doesn't have a traditional weakness in terms of like having a hard counter to it. Clem, you can tell, is feeling himself here as age 21. They comment on it. Side note. herO just gives a little wry smile to himself because it was just 2 games in a row of the Terran style that's so effective. And what I was talking about with this being a strength and weakness is the weakness of the Terran strength. The Terran strength is that they are always able to slowly gain and maintain semi-permanently and then permanently territory through just sheer force of either actual static defenses like turrets and bunkers, or a lot of their units like major attack units like siege tanks and liberators, which become static defense units essentially when they go into their siege modes. But you put enough of them out on the field, and even on big maps, if you do it right, it just creates a no man's land where anything from the other side that crosses it dies, and you just slowly move a little bit forward, a little bit forward, a little bit forward. So what's the weakness? Well, there are some specific weaknesses. Hey, small crowd to what should be a big event. As we jump into the beginning of herO's comeback here in Game 3. The weakness is that because it's so reliable, and because it's both rational but also human instinct to stick with things that are working for us or seem to be working for us, it therefore becomes predictable. And so that's what I was kind of referring to and trying to describe about herO choosing the Protoss, who are statistically the weakest, without a doubt, in almost every major category, in terms of just what you're getting for your money and time, for offensive, defensive power, and economic power, within the limits that are set. You just can never physically or legally or logistically get enough resources and have enough time to keep up with how fast Terrans and Zerg can build their units, expand their bases, and increase their economies reliably and so forth. And so as one of the British announcers said so well and poetically, these series often turn during herO's first win, or even during the end of his last loss. So like maybe he was trying some things out, experimenting even while losing to Clem in Game 2, which just wrapped up, as we're still in the early stages of Game 3 here. But it often takes herO only one game to completely change momentum and then win out the rest of the series, even when he falls behind and it seems like he's out of it. And he said it's because herO is able to shift the rhythm of the games to his rhythm, but he, like a jazz musician, is not playing a simple beat, but a complex series of melodies and polyrhythms that are mostly improvisational and experimental, and he doesn't even know what he's going to do a lot of the time. He embraces the chaos, he embraces the unpredictability, he embraces the irrationality, because over the course of a series, it gives him all sorts of small advantages that adds up to huge advantages that are born out of just sheer, I don't know what the fuck he's going to do-ness, for lack of a better term. because he doesn't know what the fuck he's gonna do. Clem, as the standard Terran player, knows exactly what he's gonna do, and herO had probably figured it out even before they started playing these games, but was still experimenting because, you know, herO can have all sorts of great ideas, but he does have to experiment on the field with them. And already in Game 3 here, he moves to just micromanaging 2 Oracle units, which are harassment flying units that do all sorts of weird stuff, but do have a laser that it can use. That you can use 1 at a time, 2 at a time, or 10 at a time, and they scale so well. And he just starts building tons of oracles, which no one ever does, and no one's done before, and now everyone's copying, now that herO's been successful with it. And for the course of this 11 or 12 minute game, the most of it is just him harassing Clem and getting in Clem's head, and getting a mental advantage over Clem. And it's obvious that herO gets in Clem's head increasingly over the course of each game, within the games, and over the course of the games, and then over the course of the whole series. So that by the time herO wins Game 5, having come back from 2-0 to win 3-2, you're not even surprised that he wins that final game, I believe, and I'm going to cheat here because this isn't a Clem herO miniseries, it's a Clem Amaro miniseries. I'm doing this because it's just instructive about how he plays Terrans and how he plays just other great players in general who are maybe heavily favored over him. If for no other reason than they're playing Terran or Zerg, which are superior to the Protoss, which is the race that he plays, and which, you know, as us Protoss players will always say, but really no one disagrees, from a statistical standpoint, are just imbalanced on purpose to be the hardest unit to play and have regular success with. So, again, so by the time we get to Game 5, and now all of a sudden you can see Clem in your screen here looking increasingly worried, and herO, who's called the Smiling Assassin, often has a grin on his face whether he's winning or losing, and just has a sort of joie de vivre, relaxed, laid back approach to life, which fits with his just crazy but super fun and appealing style of play that so many of us love watching. You can see how worried Clem is, and the clock over here is like 6 minutes and 50 seconds. By the time we got through the preceding 2 games, which herO won, and this one, which herO's about to win, in 7 or 8 minutes, which is still a very short game, but really he started winning this game at about 3 or 4 minutes into the game. You're not surprised that he has completely turned the momentum, and that he's gotten in Clem's head, that he's planted all sorts of fake strategies over the course of other games and within games, and is just able to adapt to changing circumstance, but he does it like dancing. You know, it's like salsa dancing. You know, there are or tango. There are, preset moves with the 2 partners, but when you do those moves, how you do them, the order you do them in, how long you do them, how you embellish them or do flourishes, either or both of the partners together and their chemistry, like 2 lovers, is born out of the moment. And if you can tap into that, you're a jazz musician, as I was saying, and you're just playing jazz, improvising to a complex rhythm, and vamping, slowly changing melody behind you. And it's not a safe way to win a lot, but a few people can do it when they have that level of creativity and originality, and you actually saw herO really celebrate that one, because that was a great comeback against Clem here, who at 21, as I mentioned, is one of the most dominant players of his age for a non-Korean European player. we're not gonna watch the herO Dark series at the moment. It just jumped there. So let me just jump back into the Clem game, and we'll jump into the first comeback game, Game 3, which we had started to watch. But anyways, the point being was, this was really instructive to then go back to the Maru series, which, this is just like a little interlude. I watched so much live Starcraft today. I'm absolutely exhausted, and I was recording and streaming. But I did want to get some just quick thoughts out as sort of a pre-game to herO versus Maru Game 3. Which is when herO goes up 2-1 after being down 1-0 to Maru. And then in Game 4, Maru ties it up, and then herO wins very quickly in Game 5 in almost the exact way, fashion that herO's comebacks get easier as they go along, which is different than almost any figure or team historically in sports, which is that it gets harder as you go. It's just herO's first win that's his hardest, but the time it takes for him to win during these 2, 3, 4 game comebacks actually goes down in each games. And so this first win against Clem in a best out of 5 to start the comeback goes 12 or 13 minutes of game time. But by Game 5, where he wins 3-2 and has come all the way back, it's basically over after 4 or 5 minutes. Here come the Dark Templar, who are permanently cloaked, very high damage units, and he often uses to either change the tempo or a rhythm, if you will, of these games, or to just close them out late, which is what they're built to do, but you still have to be better than an excellent Protoss player to do effectively. And so I just as a sort of appetizer to herO vs Maru Game 3, which isn't that long, and herO vs Maru Games 4 and 5 are not that long either, because again, Maru's victories tend to be much shorter than his losses, because he's just always able to hang in there, even when he's losing from early in the game, because of his creativity and just physical skill. But when he's on his game and he's setting the rhythm and he's doing the dance moves and his opponent doesn't know what he's dancing to, like Chris Pratt in the first Guardians of the Galaxy, dancing to the music in his head, it just confuses the opponent, it frustrates the opponent, it annoys the opponent, and boom, herO just laid the smackdown, and you can already see the smiling assassin mischievous grin coming back on his face. And so if you start getting interested in certain kind of players or certain races or certain play styles or so forth, I highly recommend you watch similar matchups like you would if you were studying the history of sports or whatever. Let's see, we can jump past this break into Game 4. The second of the 3 wins to come back in the quarterfinals of Valencia 2022 for herO, which is shorter than the first, and then the 5th, of course, is the shortest. I don't know about the actual times, but in terms of when they feel like they're over because of how dominant the early extremely rapid early game performances to lock up games within 2, 3, 4 minutes, which for Protoss, who are supposed to require long games to even have a chance of winning, just flips everything about the Protoss and how you're supposed to play the Protoss and how they're supposed to play against other races and other types of play styles and blah blah blah. herO flips all of that on its head and just always goes the other way. He's a serial contrarian in his play style, and they constantly are referring to it as annoying or frustrating, but they say, the broadcasters, but they say it with deep love and respect, as you can tell, because it is so fun to watch and so innovative, and they can't even tell if he's doing mind games. Like, little things like he'll do a recall of his offensive forces back to his main base, or one of his main bases, which is one of the cool things Protoss can do, is just you can just beam your offensive force back to be your defense if you start getting attacked while you are on the offense. And then of course, hopefully you've got shield batteries and photon cannons or whatever to help you. But there was a case when that happened where it looked like he did it either a little too soon or a little too late, and accidentally revealed that he was doing it, and it couldn't tell whether he was fake hiding it, knowing that he was actually being seen, or whether it was just he didn't care because herO's already 10 steps ahead, or whether he didn't think the other player would see it, and so he delayed it so the other player would see it. I mean, there's all sorts of mind games that even these broadcasters who have been following and playing these games for years, and some of them are, great players themselves, but certainly great minds, the people who do the casting for these games from around the world, they can't even figure out the mind games that herO's playing, because he doesn't just do it within individual games, but over the course of the series. And it's not that he's letting the other player go up 2-0 or 3-0, or whatever it is, before he makes his big comeback in so many cases, but it's certainly in hindsight, when you're watching these games and doing these analyses, it looks like he's sucking them just right into a giant trap by getting overly cocky and conservative and predictable in their play, so that when he decides to set the rhythm and set the dance moves and, start playing on his trumpet or saxophone or whatnot, improving and soloing away with his crazy herO Protoss Starcraft style, the other player is almost immediately confused and gets increasingly confused, frustrated, annoyed, and just paralyzed by inaction and poor decision making, while the smiling assassin sits back in his chair. As you notice, like me and 99% of all people who use computers all the time, we've got bad posture and back problems because we lean forward into our computers with keyboards and mice. But herO is always sitting way back from his screen and leaning back in his chair like he's sitting in a lounge. It's unbelievable. All the other players, if you just watch them at the bottom of the screen here during the live components, which are the final rounds, like most of the players are sort of leaning into it and staring intently at the screen and, have bent posture like normal people. Nope, herO, even while making an impossible comeback, just looked totally effortless by sitting back in his chair. He must be tall or just have long limbs, because he's clearly reaching, you can't see, he's clearly reaching forward quite a distance. If you look, the distance between his face and the screen compared to Clem, whose face, he's almost like Clem is eating his monitor. It looks like it's a trick of the camera, but even adjusting for that mentally and knowing how these things are filmed, it's a good couple feet between herO's eyesight and the screen, and you can just see that he's leaning back in his giant gaming computer chair, and so he's just as relaxed as that super cool cat at the jazz club doing the solos over the crazy jazz rhythms. I actually studied jazz. I'm just particularly inarticulate right now. But he has that quirky, laid-back, smiling, almost type B, take things as they come personalities that you need to do the things that he does that are so crazy, but he so clearly is relaxed and having fun while he does it. And you can just see, look at Clem's eyes, and Clem's getting more serious. You can see in his facial movements, and he's leaning further into the screen, and you can see just in the movement of his body that he's starting to click quicker, which doesn't mean better play. It just means that you're getting more desperate. herO's body movement almost never changes. He's sitting there, he's going like this with his eyes. He's looking back and forth, almost like he's bebopping to the rhythm of his amazing StarCraft play. It's so cool, man. It's so cool. He's such a great player. He's just such a great figure in terms of sports. Let me see how this looks without the enhancer. Competition or any sorts of arts and entertainment. herO is just one of the coolest you could ask for, and such a nerdy thing like StarCraft. And the most interesting, and as they do constantly comment, even while criticizing his individual moves, the two things the broadcasters will never skimp on is praising him for being the best Protoss player in the world. Certainly one of the most innovative StarCraft players, period, in history. But also he doesn't give us boring games, as Rotterdam, the hilarious Dutch broadcaster, often comments on. You could say things what you want about herO. Maybe you know him personally and he's a jerk. Maybe he's a nice guy. Maybe you hate the Protoss no matter what. Maybe you hate that he's so annoying and that he cheeses, as they call it, and whatever. Or maybe you like him, or maybe you're neutral, or maybe you don't know what to think of him. None of that matters, because in the end, he gives us extremely entertaining games and ends up winning way more than he should, based on just being Protoss in general, based on his extremely, colossally unorthodox style of play, from a meta macro standpoint, and even more unorthodox style of play in terms of the live moves he's making right now on the board that are happening in his head, and he's calculating things that he hasn't planned almost any of the stuff ahead of time. While most players have tried to calculate, at least theoretically, 60 to 80% of the game and hope to survive the other 20%. herO, to end this little pre-game to herO vs Mario Game 3, because I'm going to take a little bit of a quick break, and we'll have to do herO vs Clem and some of his other matchups another time. He's just that quirky, brilliant guy, and it happens to be StarCraft. That's the passion, and that he's so talented at. But it's so clearly an outlet of creativity and innovation in general that he channels through this admittedly very complex and difficult to master game. There's herO with the victory again, under 10 minutes. Clem, you can see, starting to get frustrated. And, he's looking a little sweaty. It must be hot there in Atlanta, or Valencia, I should say. In fact, June in Valencia, Spain, it would actually be quite hot. But herO is just cool as a cucumber on the inside and has to have that kind of personality to do the crazy stuff that he does. And he never gives us boring games, as Rotterdam says. So there's a little bit of herO vs Clem, a comeback just a few months before his two giant comebacks against his Korean compatriots Maru and Bunny, when he did go all the way and did win the whole thing in Atlanta, United States of America, a few months after this, for one of his many premier or major gold medals that he's won. Hundreds and hundreds of wins, most of which are unlikely or underdog wins. And most important thing is, we're supposed to have fun doing this as both players and fans and watchers, and he's having fun and we're having fun watching it, and that's the important thing. And to Clem's credit, as a young guy who gets completely taken for a ride by this crafty old veteran, Clem thinks he's got this wrapped up and he's dominating, and then it's just suddenly over for him in the space of a couple breaths in the grand scheme of things. But we don't have to feel bad for Clem. He's already won a ton of stuff. He's still winning actively now and is going to keep winning. And he does have you can tell an inner toughness to him, where this might hurt in terms of like saltiness, wipe dirt off the shoulder kind of thing. And just because he did get a little ahead of himself in terms of how good he was doing in the series as a whole, as opposed to just being up 2-0. But he's continued to be great over the last year and has many great years ahead of him. But it's good that herO got to teach him this lesson because it was super fun for all of us to watch. So, okay, we will be back very shortly to do herO versus herO Game 3. And I will show you what that looks like. If I can find it. Paging herO versus herO. Oh, here we go. So, pull this off. And here, this brings us right to where we were after last time, with herO leaning back, sitting back, lounging, thinking about his next jazz solo. There's a computer nerd gaming chair there and this bottle of water. And he always wears big baggy clothing too. He doesn't wear like, athletes, like tight shirts like all the other guys do, who are mostly pretty built for computer nerds. herO has these like he almost looks like a Vulcan. He's got these like cloaks that he wears, and then yellow and black and stuff. I just love everything about him, including his style, and his rhythm. And so we will jump back in after a break to herO vs. herO Game 3. Games 3 and 4 are both very hard fought and close, but not super long. We're through the long games, which are the first two. And again, like happened with Clem in that series that I previewed a bit there while talking for the last 45 minutes or so, by the time the comeback is being completed and it's the 5th of 5 games, he's already shifted the rhythm, he's shifted the melody to be what he wants to be playing from his instrument of choice. This game of Starcraft 2, and a mouse and keyboard and a computer and whatnot. And the other players just can't keep up with the complexity and really beauty and art of that rhythm. So thanks for joining as always, and see you back in a very short while for games 3, 4, and 5 of herO vs. herO, and then the finals against Bunny, also from Korea. And an even more epic comeback by herO. That's even more crazy in the shifts and swings of momentum and so forth. Thanks for joining us, and we'll be back with you soon. Much appreciated.